The head coach has been chosen, but was it the right choice by the Pelicans? We'll cover Coach Mosley in this edition of The Nest. Hello everybody, welcome back to The Nest Star XP. My name is Robin back, and we're going to take a little break from covering each NBA team's rebuilding off-season and cover a little close to home and cover the Pelicans. So this is a lot of decisions have been made this offseason already, and this was probably the biggest one that fans were looking towards in terms of like the head coach decision and things like that. So this is a very hot topic, so I wanted to cover it as soon as possible. And we'll kind of go over my thoughts on it, but and also why I think that Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver ended up deciding on Mosley over some of the other candidates, so we'll get into that. But before we get into it, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the subscribe button, go check out the TikTok, the Instagram, all of that stuff. Go check out the other teams that have been rebuilding this offseason. Just everything like that, go and check that out, and I'll definitely appreciate it. But stay tuned for all that as well. If you don't see your team, they'll definitely be coming, don't worry. So first off, if you haven't heard, the Pelicans have officially announced Jamahl Mosley, former head coach for the Orlando Magic, to be the head coach for the New Orleans Pelicans. And there was a lot of candidates that we were looking into, that we wanted to look into, and some of the notable ones that we heard were finalists were Rajon Rondo, obviously. Darvin Ham was an option. I think Sean Sweeney was in the mix. I don't think he was ever a finalist. Or I can't remember his first name, but Hetzel was also an option. He's another assistant coach. So a lot of really good candidates were interviewed and things like that, but they ended up going with Jamahl Mosley. And why do I think they did this? I actually think that there's a couple of reasons why they did it. If you know anything about Joe Dumars and you know about his history, you know that he was a member and a pivotal part of the Bad Boys Pistons in the late 80s. And that is where he derives a lot of his experience and a lot of his mentality when it comes to being an executive, being a team builder, and things like that. So he's big on culture. And what, by the way, I should probably say this, I'm not quoting Joe Dumars. I am not speaking for him or anything like that. This is just what I'm interpreting from what I've seen from his work. So just to preface that. But like I said, he takes a lot of his personal experience from being those physical bad boy Pistons, and he applies that to his team. So he is big on developing that hard-nosed, disciplined culture. And I think that's why he and Troy ended up going with Jamahl Mosley, because of his identity with culture, with his mentality of having a strong physical basketball-driven culture. And so in the end, I think that's the primary reason. But I also think that Joe Dumars is big on defense. He's big on physicality, and Jamahl Mosley preaches that. Joe and Troy, I should say, they aren't extremely set on this idea of analytics, on effective basketball, on efficient basketball, things like that. They really want physical, old school basketball. And whether you like that or not, we can get into that later, but that's the mentality that they seem to want to go for. And I think that's another reason why they went with Mosley. And if that's the mentality that you want to go with, Jamahl Mosley's the perfect guy to do that. He really is. He's an experienced head coach, 5 seasons with the Orlando Magic, several playoff appearances, several 40-plus win seasons. So he's had some success with the team, despite the recent stuff that's happened with Jamahl and the Magic. But I do think that he is still a pretty solid coach, and I do think that he will be a great culture setter and a great team builder in terms of team culture and team dynamics and team development. I think that he will be a pivotal part of this Pelicans organization going forward. And I think the big thing with hiring Mosley now is that it's going to come down to, can he get the players to buy in? Because the reason that Jamahl Mosley's, I don't want to say this was the only reason by any means, but I'm not putting this on the players at all, but I believe that the main reason that the Magic failed so miserably, for lack of a better word, the reason they failed so miserably, especially in this postseason, was because they lost their faith in Jamahl Mosley. They lost their belief in him. And if you don't have the players buy in, you don't have their trust, then the team isn't going to operate the way it should. Because extremely early in their career, or in Jamahl Mosley's career, he was drawing up some really good things. The team had faith in him. They bought into what Jamahl was buying, and I keep calling him Jamahl, what Coach Mosley was buying or selling. And I do think that if he can do the same thing with this Pelicans team and they can fully buy into him, they could be a very impactful and very fun team to watch at the very least. And I think it's ultimately going to come down to guys like Zion Williamson and Trey Murphy. And like I was saying, Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver, they seem to have this mentality of getting those culture setters, those hard-nosed, disciplined professional players. And you see that with a lot of the guys that they draft or a lot of the guys that are already on this team. Just taking a look down the team, DeJounte Murray, Sadiq Bey, those are two guys that really fit that bill. Obviously, Jeremiah Fears also fits the bill. And I think we're going to see a couple more guys kind of go towards like that idea as well as we like start looking around, and whether we get trades, whether we draft guys and trade for picks or things like that, whatever the case may be. I think you're going to continue to see that, and there's going to be guys that fit alongside that idea, that fit alongside Mosley as well. But the ultimate question, like I said, comes down to, can Z and Trey buy into this? Because if DeJounte, if Jamahl, if Jeremiah, if Derek Queen, if these guys can get these core pieces, Trey, Z, even Derek Queen, if they can get them to buy in long term to this identity, that would push this team way beyond the potential that they already have. It's really just a matter of getting them on the right track, getting the whole team together on the right track. Because if this team, with its length, with its versatility, with its physical capabilities, with its defensive capabilities, with all of it, if they can buy into what Jamahl Mosley is trying to preach, what Joe Dumars is trying to preach, what Troy Weaver is trying to preach, they can be a very impactful and fun team. I'm not going to say they're going to go out there and beat the Thunder or the Spurs or anything like that, but I will say that they can be a very enjoyable team to watch, and with the young talent that they have, they could also develop into something extremely powerful later on in their careers. But that's a question for later down the road. What we're focusing now on is, can this culture work now? And I think that's going to be the big question for Joe and Troy and even Jamahl going forward. But honestly, I don't hate the hire. I'm not going to be one of these people that is sitting here saying like, oh, they didn't sign the dude that I really wanted. They didn't sign Sean Sweeney. They didn't sign Hetzel. They didn't sign Rajon Rondo. They didn't sign any of those guys. I'm not going to sit here and throw a hissy fit over it. I'm not going to be pouty over it. I'm not exactly thrilled. I'm not shooting for the stars right now because we got Jamahl Mosley. But I'm not disappointed either, because I do think he's a quality head coach with head coaching experience. He has playoff experience, whether it was a deep playoff run or not. He has playoff experience. He has experience drawing up plays for guys like Paolo Banchero and Zion Williamson, with him running the offense to an extent. And he's done some pretty successful things with a team that was extremely poorly constructed, in my opinion, not as a Magic like watcher or enjoyer or anything like that, but a poorly constructed roster. He did some pretty good things with that team. So I do think with a team that's a little bit more well constructed, and a team that's a little more versatile with what he can actually do with it, I do think that Jamahl will be a solid enough coach for us. But like I said, I'm not thrilled. I'm not like jumping for joy or anything like that. But I'm not disappointed either, because I could absolutely be changing my tune in 2 months or 4 months or whatever, because I was saying the same thing about Willie Green when we hired him. But it really comes down to, can he make it work? Can this team buy in? And can he get this team to buy in? And then the other question, obviously, is just who are the assistant coaches going to be that we surround him with. We haven't made any final decisions with that, but we're pretty much clearing house with the head coaches or the assistant coaches. So I'm very interested to see who Troy and Joe, who they bring in to help Mosley. And I'm really hoping that they get a really good offensive mind to be the primary assistant coach. Whether that's James Borrego. I know James Borrego, he's a fantastic offensive coach, but I don't know if he's going to be willing to come back and continue to be that role. But if you can get just a high-quality offensive assistant coach, that would be amazing for Jamahl, especially if the two's like offensive mindsets align very, very well. And I don't know if James Borrego's mindset kind of aligns like that, but I do know that some guys like maybe Sam Cassell, if he doesn't get the head coaching job, maybe Thiago Splitter, he might be a solid option, because he kind of did the same thing with Denny Avdia in in Portland, they kind of have a similar concept of coaching. So I do think that those guys would be very interested to see, but I haven't like made a full comprehensive list or anything like that. So just keep an eye out for that, because I think that that may be the key that unlocks the figurative Pandora's box in terms of our success. So we'll stay tuned for that. But all in all, what do y'all think? Do y'all think that Jamahl Mosley was a good hire? Do you think we should have gone someone else, or are you just happy it's not Darvin Ham? Because I know that was my reaction when I first saw it. No offense to Darvin Ham, mad respect for you, but when I heard it wasn't Darvin Ham, I was like, okay, well, it's not Darvin Ham. It's not the end of the world. That's all we in the Pelicans Discord were worried about, and that's all I was worried about as well. But what do you think? Let me know in your comments down below, and make sure, again, to go check out the TikTok, the Instagram, subscribe, and just check out all that stuff. I'm going to be continuing to cover the NBA playoffs, which at the time, well, it's going to be like posted tomorrow probably, so I can get this out quickly, but it was a pretty good game last night versus the Spurs and the Thunder, so I'm interested to see how that series goes, and I'm loving how the playoffs have been playing out so far. So make sure to stay tuned for that, and make sure to stay tuned for more content relating to Pels and the NBA as a whole. And if you don't see your team listed in the offseason rebuilding playlist, they'll be here soon, I promise you. So just stay tuned for that. But until then, y'all, peace.